Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Behind the Veil, a show that provides insight into the world of weddings. I'm your host, Keith Willard. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about hurricanes and wedding planning, because if you're planning a wedding on the coastline in the eastern half of the United States, believe me, it's going to come into your brain if you have your wedding scheduled between August and November. Now, what are the chances of it actually happening? Well, if you're in Tampa for this weekend, it's probably 100%. But we're going to talk about that. And we're going to also talk about all the other little pieces and parts that you probably need to start thinking about if you're planning your wedding here, especially in South Florida. And then we're also going to be talking about the vendor side of it. What are the vendors going through when we're talking about hurricanes? And what do we do in the unlikely event that a hurricane is actually going to hit during your wedding day? So to help us guide us through all this conversation, we've welcomed back a favorite of ours, Kaplan with Gaetana Events. But before I bring her on, let me introduce my co-host, Marci Guttenber with An Affair to Remember by Marci.
Hello.
Hi, Marci.
Hello on this lovely wet day.
I know. So, here we are talking about hurricanes and wedding planning and what's happening. We're like literally watching a hurricane come towards Florida.
Yes.
Oh, it is like everybody's worst nightmare when it comes to this. I mean, I'm just a little kind of caught off guard by the fact that we actually have a hurricane, because we've had a fairly quiet season.
Very quiet season. I mean, I was shocked that we even got it, because we were all expecting it to go further west. And now it's going to go towards Tampa, they're saying. So,
well, and remember when the cone was first happening, and this is one of the things that we're going to talk about when we bring Gaetana on, is that cone. When we talk about the cone, oh my God, the stress that comes through. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a bride. But let me bring on Gaetana. Gaetana, welcome to the show. Hi, honey bunny.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Gaetana.
Welcome
Happy
back.
To be here on
I know.
Beautiful day.
Coming on.
One of the things about all three of us being in South Florida is that we're all watching the rain come down, and we're all doing the same thing, watching the weather report every 4 hours when the new thing comes out. So what is
Looks like we're old hat,
I know.
Yes.
5 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. I forget what it is, but yeah.
We're looking for Jim Cantori.
Yes.
I don't really understand that, but we'll talk. You'll explain it later. Anyway, so okay, let's talk about wedding planning and hurricanes, because one of the things that when a bride comes to us and is wanting to plan their wedding between August and November, one of the first things that they always bring up is, well, what should we do it a different day or a different part of the year because of hurricanes? And my immediate response is no. Don't let that affect your planning at this point, because you never know what can affect a wedding. I mean, if you're somewhere else in the country, it could be a tornado or some type of, horrible weather phenomenon that comes through. I mean, nowadays with climate change.
Right. I mean, it could be anything. It could be a family illness. It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Correct.
But plan for the day, plan for the time of year that speaks to you.
Right. Exactly. Plan for the time of year that speaks to you. And if the fall is one of those things that you really love in South Florida, then do it. Move forward with it. But, there are some things that we can talk about, when talking about a wedding in South Florida during hurricane season. I mean, what is one of the first things that you tell your clients, Gaetana, when they say, well, what about hurricanes?
So I think one of the first things when they worry about hurricane or any kind of weather situation, and we know that, it's not imminent. It's not definitely going to happen. It just might happen. Is if it makes you feel better, let's get some insurance for your day of your wedding, just in case it's something that we need to completely postpone. Best case scenario as well, let's start putting a little fun together for that rainy day. We don't know if it's going to be a hurricane, but it just might be, as we're getting right now. We're not getting the hurricane, but we are getting a lot of rain bands. Rain. So if you are having a wedding, and I've been doing a lot of weekday weddings lately, so be very possible that I would have a wedding this week on a Wednesday or a Thursday.
Yeah.
You need a tent. So any of these situations are going to cost you out of pocket that you weren't expecting when you were going ahead and plan your wedding for this time of year. So maybe if it's early enough, start planning ahead.
That's
to
smart.
Have that fund set aside, so you're not hit with an expense that's, could be substantial.
You know what? That's actually a really smart thought process is, start putting a little bit of money aside for the just in case, because if it's not a hurricane, it could be weather, it could be needing a tent, it could be, wind. We've had that kind of scenario before. And Gaetana, before we went live, I love what you said. You said, and look, if nothing happens, then you have money towards your honeymoon.
Right.
You
have that fund. If you've been putting a little bit away, every week, squirrel away $50. If you get an extra $100, put it away, squirrel it away.
Yeah.
In a little bit of we'll call it a real rainy day fund because, well, actually that's what it is. But if you don't need it for that rainy day situation, go ahead and get that splurge you wanted for your wedding. You wanted an Order Loca hour. You wanted special charger plates, or you wanted to do something really cool during your honeymoon. You've got that fund with you and you didn't have to find it somewhere. You've been saving it all along. So start early if you know it's during our season.
Yeah.
And at least have a contingency for that.
I tell people, like, get your brain in the right mindset when it comes to having to deal with the idea of a hurricane, because being flexible is a huge piece in this world. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when not Katrina, oh my God, Irma, when Hurricane Irma came through. It didn't really affect us. But the problem is that the particular place that I had the wedding, they had a bunch of palm trees that fell down, and the insurance company shut down the ballroom, even though there was nothing wrong with the ballroom because of insurance issues, and we had to move it. And actually, the new place ended up being much nicer than the old place. Because they were so accommodating, because they had the space available. They're like, look, we'll match the price. And then the old place gave all the money back because obviously they couldn't have the thing.
Very important.
Right. Yeah. But because the couple was flexible in their thought process, we were able to shift everything within a couple of days. I mean, it was a little panic for me. They were fine. But, for me, it was like, okay, now I got to find a place that is willing to work with us. But, and that's a big piece, is being flexible. But I love what you said also, wedding insurance. I don't think a lot of people really understand the idea of wedding insurance. And the three of us were reading up on it, because I don't think even the three of us really had a true concept of wedding insurance. And but travelers, travelers insurance has wedding insurance, which I was really surprised, because that's not a like fly by night insurance company.
Right. But even aside from a tent for the event, I mean, you think about your guests arriving to your venue, and if the venue does not have a portico or an overhang, and you want to provide something, I mean, you still would need a little bit of an awning, so that they have, so that they're not getting wet as they're coming out of their cars.
Right.
So, I mean, just a little small something is something that you may need to save for as well.
Yes.
Oh, you're talking about the honey fund. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, let's talk about the fact that have an actual hurricane affecting your wedding is a very small percentage. Yes. It's like
minuscule.
1%. It's like less than 1% chance of a hurricane actually affecting your wedding. Now, I think it's different because, unlike a thunderstorm, we have weeks to watch the weather, talk about the damn thing coming towards us. And so it seems like it's a lot more than it actually is. I mean, how long have we been listening about this dang thing? For at least 10 days at this point.
Days.
Right. So I feel like the hurricane's been here for 10 days already, and it still hasn't even hit Florida. So
we're all tired of it.
Right? We're all tired of it. But
we're all tired of the rain already.
I think the perception is that there are more hurricanes that actually hit us than actually do, because there's so much coverage about it, the impending doom, quote unquote.
I agree on that.
Right.
And I think the hardest group of people that I have with any kind of convincing weather-wise, when I speak to people about this time of year, let's think about our northern location wedding, our weddings that are destination. They're coming down here from up north.
Right.
They don't really know our seasons the way that we do. They plan it because they love the fall. They're thinking fallen leaves and apples and that nip in the air that we never feel.
That we never feel.
We all put up fake leaves and we all do the fun fall things, but we never really get that feeling. But they plan their weddings down here because they think it's a great time of year to do it, not understanding that these could be the trials, tribulations, and perils that could happen, during your planning. And when we hit them with that, it's a total surprise. And I think that's why, if we recognize that as planners in this area, or a venue or a caterer or any of those things, if we let them know soon enough, then we can help them over that uncomfortable hump when if indeed that thing is going to happen in some way. But you're right, it's such a minuscule part. We're more apt to get the wind and the rain and the tropical feel than the actual hurricane.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that, like, even now we're experiencing, tropical winds tomorrow, supposedly all day, which is Wednesday. By Saturday, it's supposed to be back to our normal 40% chance of rain. So it's like business as usual by Saturday, by Friday, by Thursday.
We have 6 months of the year that are affected, and the eastern side of Florida typically will get it the first part of the 6 months from June to about August. And then the last half is, on the west side. So depending on what happens with the warm waters that are already over there, it could either go towards Mexico or it could come towards us.
Right.
So Gaetana, as somebody that used to manage a venue, right? What were some of the things that, contingency plans when it came to, if it actually happened on that wedding day? Did you ever have a wedding that actually had to be relocated or have a new date because it actually hit on that specific day?
So we did. I believe it was 2019. I'm not sure if that was Irma or if that was another storm, but in 2019, right at the beginning of the month, we did have a storm that we were, it didn't actually hit. We didn't actually get it. So that's why I'm thinking it's Irma.
Yeah,
but
I think it's
because of all the watches, the warnings, and the shutdowns, we did have to give our event the heave-ho. We can't do it. We have to close down, for safety purposes, for not only yourselves, but for every vendor that has to come, including my own maintenance staff and security.
And your guests.
Yeah. So, you have to think about everyone, from the people opening the building to the people you're inviting to your event. There's so many people involved that you have to think about their security too, and driving and all of these different things. We did have to close it down. What we would do is offer them another viable date that any of the vendors can come up with together, as long as we could all come together on that viable date. Or in worst case scenario, yes, we would offer a refund. There was always a force of nature or act of God clause in our contract that if the show can't go on, you are entitled to your money back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that a lot of us fell back onto our act of God clause when it came to COVID.
Yes.
So it was like it felt like a very similar circumstance. Yeah. Right. It felt like a very similar circumstance. And so again, when you're talking to a bride that is like, well, what about hurricanes? I basically say the same thing. I don't sugarcoat it. It's absolutely a possibility. But a thunderstorm or high winds or some type of tropical normalcy that we have here in South Florida is going to be more apt to mess up your day than an actual hurricane.
Yes, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And in the rare case, have that hurricane insurance. I mean, the fact that, like Travelers has hurricane insurance for weddings specifically. And the rates range from $105 to $550 as I'm like reading it on their price sheet. One of the things that you have to be careful of, though, when you do wedding insurance, is that you have to make sure that what it says in the claim in order to claim the money from it, because a couple of them were a little surprising because it only covered the payments that you've already made. So if you hadn't made the final payments and the hurricane was coming, because a lot of times people like want final payment on the day of the wedding, it wouldn't cover it.
Right.
I was like, and it also, one of them says if the vendor doesn't show up, and I'm like, it's a hurricane. Why would we show up if we had to cancel everything?
Wow, really?
So I was a little surprised by that. I was like, okay, so you got to be careful about this stuff.
I think you also mentioned that it didn't cover some of the vendors. There was one that didn't cover like catering, which is
food and beverage. One of
your major expenses during your event is going to be, of course, the food and beverage. So I guess you really have to read every little piece of fine print. if that's something that you're going to, or at least go over it with your client if that's something you're recommending them to do.
I think the number one thing that I've read and that I agree with 100% is communication. Having communication with your entire team, all of your vendors and your hotel and your venue is key in order to prepare yourself and to prepare your event when it comes to hurricane planning, right? Yes. Making sure that everybody is together. And then also on the opposite side for your guests to have a hotline, have a group text, have an email blast, whatever it is to communicate with your guest what exactly is happening and if the wedding is actually going to happen or not. Because in a case like this, there was a lot of people that were worried about canceling their wedding because they originally the cone of concern was coming right through Fort Lauderdale. And I had told my clients, I'm like, wait, pause. I guarantee you that cone is going to move. I breathe. It's going to move. I promise it's going to move. And it did. It moved dramatically. Obviously.
It's true.
So, so that's the other thing is that keep calm.
Yes.
Don't stress out. Don't freak out. Keep calm.
Well, I think that's just a general forte of people that are planners is we never run, we walk with conviction because we don't. If you start running in an event,
everybody behind you.
The planner running.
I always tell
you're going to have a backlog right behind you.
I always tell people, I'm like, look, if you see me get scared, you better run because I never get worried.
Exactly.
I never get scared.
We have to be very stoic in most of what we do. So
100% because people read on our face like how the wedding is going.
Helping people read their way through a possible turnout of a hurricane for their wedding is definitely the time to keep your calm.
Right. I think that the other piece is that you're going to have to explain to your clients and you talked about the honey fund or the rainy fund before, but you also have to explain to your clients that your guests may not feel comfortable traveling around a hurricane. Like in other words, even though we have a hurricane coming towards us, and it's going towards Tampa, there are going to be some people that are like, I really don't want to have to deal with the airports or traveling. And that you're just going to have to suck that part up. And just to be like, look, you already put in your final numbers. It is what it is. Just move forward and enjoy it as much as you possibly can. But that money's already spent. So let that part go.
Agreed.
Right. I think so. A lot of it, again, we're going to talk. Mindset seems to be the number one thing that we keep coming back to is be calm and trust in your vendors because they're gonna help you through this.
I think the hardest part sometimes though is explaining it to your brides.
Yeah.
That it's rain. It happens. It's wet. You may be melty or something. It may be windy. It may not be the perfect scenario.
Right.
But it's still your wedding day, and we're going to help you get through that. That's where we come in and put you over that hump of uncertainty when it comes to not knowing what that day is going to bring for you.
Yeah.
But as a venue too, though, Keith, I also have to say, you mentioned that one of your weddings was done because of the insurance for the building for the trees.
Right.
So in a case like mine, where the building that I was running at the time was a very sturdy, safe building around since the 50s with no problem, we were one of those buildings to take a lot of people in.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So we were the people who were getting the call saying, are you still open? Because we have to relocate.
Right.
And how can you work with us? And I agree. I think on those terms, if you can work it out with the people that you work for or with and help those people by coming in at same cost or at least close to. Right. So you can let their weddings get off the ground in a still comfortable way.
Yes. Well, and as a hotel.
Rapport.
Right, exactly. And it does. It actually adds to your reputability. Is that right? No, reputation as somebody that, can work well with last minute issues. I mean, when I used to be the DOC for Ritz-Carlton, I mean, that was one of the things is that we had a contingency plan in place in case of hurricanes. And it was well known and well communicated with the clients to say, look, in that case, we are going to give you date options to move your date. Is it the best thing in the world? No, but no natural disaster is.
Right.
I mean, and that's what it is. It's a natural disaster. It's like if you planned a wedding in California and it got struck by a earthquake, you'd have to deal with the same issues. So no matter where you go in the country, life is life. It's going to happen. Just you got to depend on your vendors, and you just got to make sure that you reread your contracts. And that's the other piece, is that if a hurricane's coming towards a place that you have your wedding booked, reread your contracts.
And I think when you say depend on your vendors, I think that, one of the things that I see is that clients need to understand that we deal with this a lot. I mean, like this is not something that we deal with once every 10 years. We deal with it year to year, month to month, day to day. And that when we're making suggestions to them, listen to our suggestions, because we can only do so much as far as give them the information, but the action has to come sometimes from them. And listen to your vendors, because they're the ones that are experts in what they're doing.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that you have to when you're a bride or a couple or a same-sex wedding. I don't want to put LGBTQ plus open to all weddings, obviously, because love is love is love. One of the things that you have to remember is you got, again, I just lost my brain because I felt bad because Gaetana is having connection issues.
Yes.
Anyway, but reread your contracts, communicate with all of your vendors, have a honey fund or a rainy day fund to the side, so that way at least you have an opportunity in case you need to dip into some extra funds for the tent. Understand that it's a low percentage, but just like anywhere else in the country, you're gonna have that same percentage of some type of natural disaster happening, and be flexible. And I think that those are the short term, or the small amount of points that we can give you when it comes to planning for a hurricane. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think that, with the call time, when you talked about call time, we need to make call times, certain times we have to make them ahead of time, because as Gaetana was saying earlier, sometimes you need to let the vendor know if you're going to bring in a tent or something, you have to make these arrangements, in advance by a certain time, so that you get on their books, so that they can schedule it, they can have the material, they can get the resources to get them, the product to the end. And, a CO, a certificate of occupancy, they have to get that all taken care of before the event day. So they need that time to ramp it all up and get everything scheduled out.
And that comes back to the communication piece.
Yes, absolutely.
But okay, how many days do we typically have to adjust for a hurricane coming towards us? I'm saying 2 months. I feel like I've been watching the news for 2 months on this same damn hurricane.
I think once something comes off the coast of Africa, don't we all start watching that little? Watching the wobble and the dance. It's like the cha-cha slide on the map. And it goes to the left and it goes to the right. And we breathe a sigh of relief if we see it going out into the Atlantic. But I think
3 or 4 weeks, maybe.
Yes, at least 3 weeks minimum. We know that it's a general direction, I think, at that point.
That's funny, though.
And
I tell my brides, I tell my couples, I'm like, don't worry, because I'm stressing out more than you are.
Yes.
I promise
You're just not showing it.
I'm just not showing it. I got the stoic going on, but I am watching it like a hawk. When it comes to so as planners and as people on the vendor side, how do you prep for a hurricane when it's coming towards you as a vendor, not as a client, but as a vendor? I mean, what are the things that you're thinking about for you and your business when something like this is happening?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to think about, putting that just the client part aside, but for any event that you're doing, you have to think about the logistics of where it is. Is it inside or outside?
Right.
Obviously, if it's outside, it's going to be a much bigger undertaking to try and get something off the ground, because they typically don't have an inside contingency somewhere on property.
Yeah.
But if you're inside and you can move something like that, but again, letting all of your other vendors know that there is a possibility that something's going to move or happen. I think that's where the biggest thing is, because let's let's see how hard it is sometimes to get that group of 5 or 6 core vendors together for any wedding,
right,
on a regular date that everybody's available.
and that's the hard part. That's
right. Now let's throw into the mix that it's not going to be that day anymore. It's going to be some day down the line where somebody's going to have a booking somewhere. So it's not that easy to just say, oh, let's make it next week. Now think about all of the guests that have hotel plans, rental cars, hotels, airfare. Are they going to do it again? Are they going to come again? Do they have insurance? Did they book a flight where they can rebook? There's so many different movable parts to any one of these weddings. It's not as simple as the planner, the band, the building, the bride.
Right. Well, and it's a rough subject. I mean, the thing is that it's only happened a handful of times to myself. I mean, I can count 3 weddings, maybe 4 weddings in the last 20 years that this actually had a massive effect on, that it actually like fell on the day or the week. And so a lot of times, you know, we're winging it in many ways. We're like, do it. So I usually do a group email to the vendors and say, okay, we know that we're going to have to move this wedding. Here are the date options that are currently that we're looking at. Please just reply with the dates that you're available. And then that way I can pull all together like the one date that everybody is available, and then present that to the couple and say, look, there is one date that everybody is available, or there's one date that, well, the DJ is not available, or some, you know, one of the vendors is not available, but who you know, where is that importance to you as far as vendors? You know, is the photographer? Yeah. Is it? Right. Yeah. Who do you mind like pushing off the island?
The lifeboat.
Right. It's like, is the photographer worth pushing off the boat? Or, you know, I mean, you have to make those judgment calls later.
Well, yes. I have had, same as you, very, very small percentage of any kind of event, both, you know, on either side, on the catering side, the venue side, or the planning side, that really had to lose a date. I did have one couple, though, several years ago that decided, since they were getting monies back and we just couldn't come together on dates for everything, they just did a smaller destination. They made it as their honeymoon as well.
There you go.
And they just, you know, scrapped the big wedding plans and said, we're going to take whatever money we can recover.
Yep.
And we're going to make something else out of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Nice. Yeah.
I love that. You know, the thing is that we keep talking about this and we keep skirting the issue a little bit, is that we're more worried about the crap that happens week to week here. We're worried about, you know, brides sweating because the 100% humidity and 98 degrees outside. We're worried about, you know, the wind coming in at 40 miles an hour, and not because of a tropical storm, but just because where we are, you know, because God decided to throw some wind at us. I mean, that's one of the things that we deal with just on a weekly basis. So I don't feel like a hurricane is really that big of a deal overall in the grand scheme of things. I'm not talking about like when it actually happens, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm more worried about like, what am I going to do to block the wind? So the you know, that the bride spent, you know, 6 hours getting her hair done in a very specific way is not blown all to crap as soon as she steps around the corner.
Which is any regular day at a beach wedding. Here. Any regular beach day is that day.
Yes.
And I tell couples all the time, I'm like, you know, beach weddings are really lovely in pictures.
Yes.
With your hair out to hair.
Yes, but that's it. It's only good in a photo. It's not good in real life typically.
Right. No.
I mean, to have that perfect, gorgeous day with no clouds in the sky and, you know, just enough wind to keep people a little cool.
It's as rare as a hurricane.
It's as rare as a hurricane.
That's a great point.
That is a great point.
As a hurricane.
You know, we're walking around with, you know, paper towels trying to, you know, dry the pits of the bride on a normal weekend.
And let's think about the men in suits for that matter.
Oh, I mean, my God. I feel so bad for these guys.
Out on a beach on any given day down here from, you know, June to mid-October when they turn the faucet off is Yeah. I find mid-October, it goes to like 3/4 off. And then November, it seems to be pretty much gone, except for that rare occasional.
We have humid and less humid.
Sleeveless, ladies can wear a sleeveless dress or a flowy dress.
In this weather.
Men, they're in there like, they're with their bow ties or their ties and their jackets or their vests.
Let's talk about the mother-in-law dress that is made out of the wrong fabric, and you get a little boob sweat happening, and it's just like, and you're like, what do I do with this? Oh my God. Yeah. That's the realities of doing a wedding in South Florida.
I think that if we do make our clients just truly aware of what they could be technically dipping their toes into, what kind of a pond they're testing the waters in when it's this kind of year, hurricane can be pretty a heavy thought to people that just don't know the area. Like I can't imagine the newbies that moved to the state within the last year or so that really have experienced this, that are now living in the Tampa area.
Oh no.
When they're saying evacuate and
don't sit around in your damn property.
You can't even stay here. So imagine the bride that's in the situation that might be having a Thursday wedding this week.
Yeah. Oh God.
In Tampa.
I can't even imagine the stress, but that's why you have event professionals. That's why you have wedding planners involved in that, so that they can take that stress off of you. But I have relatives that live near Tampa, and they're not leaving. And I'm like, y'all are friends aren't leaving. No. I'm like, I'm glad the genes missed me on that brain issue, because I would leave.
Yeah. I think when the words total devastation and leave enter the same paragraph.
Yeah.
It's
just, I'm out of here.
I'm actually more worried about electricity. I can't handle not having AC. I mean, after
the
2 weeks.
Exactly. No AC, a refrigerator, a microwave, and a television. I think if I think that's what we worry about. We actually worry about that more, I think, than the actual hurricane itself.
Oh yeah, you damn right. I mean, I'll survive a hurricane because I'll be out of town.
And there's a lot of venues that have hotels. I know, for instance, hotels, unlike the building again that I was in, we were in a complete cinder block and steel structure,
which was amazing. Yeah.
So hotels, they're mostly windows. So they have a certain wind policy. They're not allowed to have something over a certain wind speed. And that's going to go for a tropical storm on up. So a tropical storm could also put the heels in the dirt on any kind of an event that's happening, depending on the wind strength.
Yeah.
Even moving it inside could be treacherous if there's a wall of windows.
Talking about heels in the dirt. Hello, Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
What's the tea, everybody? The doll is here.
I love it. Oh my God. Well,
I'm ready. Come on, Brooke.
And you're sitting in the dark, so I'm assuming you have no power, or what happened?
No, I'm not. Well, hold on, let's see. I wore lashes.
I'm totally messing.
Oh.
I'm totally. There you go. Hello.
Oh.
There you go.
The mess that is. You should see the bottom of this top.
Oh my goodness.
Eyelash glue. Get into these tails, girl. Look, I couldn't find 2 ponytail holders, so this is like a headband. That's a legit.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, you're
I did this all for you.
I know, and we're about to be done.
Whatever,
I'm listening. Well, so when it comes to prepping for weather, I think that the better term for all of this is prepping for weather in general.
Yes. I mean,
right? It can be a headache though, because it turns so fast.
Yeah.
I had a friend, I was just telling Keith this morning, that left down here and drove to Tampa to get away from the original. And I was like, oh, this thing.
That's why you don't listen to the cone until 48 hours before. I mean,
when I see Keith back up with bottles of water, cases of water, and some combos, I know it's time to bet.
You're damn right.
My nephew had to evacuate. He's in Fort Myers area.
Yeah.
But again, that's when we talk about the planning process. We know what South Florida is like. I mean, if I was doing a wedding in Minnesota, I mean, I'd be worried about when the cattle are coming by. I have no idea what weddings in Minnesota
or
are like.
Snow.
Or snow, right?
No.
Or some type of. I would trust in the vendors that are there in that particular area to tell me what are the possibilities and what are the options for after. What after. I think that's a good way to put it. Just what do we do after?
I think for us though in Florida, knowing that we know how hurricanes can work, we know that they're going to come through. Are we going to get a really bad one? That we don't know, that we can't really prepare for, but we do know a good enough time in advance to help people replan. But look at some of the other states where they can't do that. California, fires, mudslides, earthquakes. You don't know when that stuff's happening.
I mean, why would you do a wedding in California?
That's a lot of
How
stuff.
about don't get married in Florida?
And it doesn't
season.
Right, and you don't just recover
Call me
from
crazy.
tornado.
Right? I know.
Tornadoes just drop down. We don't
Tornadoes
know.
are fun. They can be
Tornadoes
but that Mrs. Gulch got on her bike and she was with the basket and the dog.
Gulch.
But they could knock a place out for a very long time.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like why do a wedding in California? I mean, you just mentioned it. Wildfires, mudslides, tornadoes,
earthquakes.
And they just happen.
Up over there.
And they just happen.
And I think
we have noticed.
Right, but we're built
kind of lucky.
For this. Our buildings are built for this.
Yes.
Well, we're kind of lucky too because we do get a little bit of notice and we can anticipate and we can watch the news and so forth. I think that the best thing to do is just be proactive. And the other thing is yes, we're already dealing with this hurricane right now. And there's not much to do as far as buying insurance. But if you are considering having an event, sometime in the cone of events, of the hurricane season, it's not too late to purchase event insurance if you plan it out further, far enough in advance.
There's a certain
window. That's going to come to Florida if you don't live here as a destination wedding, and there's that block of months that's called hurricane season. I would definitely look into that and purchase. Talk to your wedding planner or professional to guide you in the right direction for that. Because that can save a lot of heartache and a lot of.
You have to buy it.
Yes.
You have to buy it before it's actually showing in the Atlantic, by the way, guys.
Right.
So, in other words, if there's something coming off the coast of Africa and it has more than 50% chance of development, they will not sell you insurance for that part of time. So, you got to buy it in advance, at least 6 months.
I think it's 6 months. And I think that if, first thing I would do is go out to visitflorida.org and go under their resources. There's a page there called Event-Insurance. And you can read about all the different ins and outs of what they're what they're suggesting, and then go out and buy your own insurance if that's something that you feel you need.
I think that's smart. I in the future, when, like I said, we talked about this before we went on. I mean, Ocean Reef, I definitely did insurance for that. I mean, I did the insurance for them on that because it was way too much money. I was just thinking, oh my God,
Or get married in March.
I think it's like between $100
to March down here.
I think it's like between $100 to $200 for every $10,000 or something like that.
Yeah, the Travelers one was $100 to $550, which was amazing. But I mean, $550 is kind of a bit of money. But anyway, so what are you guys doing now? I mean, because obviously we have nothing that, like, tomorrow. I think I've wiped out my calendar for tomorrow. I don't know about y'all. I'm working from home.
Yeah. Catching up
on
all
get a kiddie pool and set it outside behind my car and collect the good rain and see if I can't turn that into wine or vodka or something. Or wait for that old bitch with the bike to just, come around down. I don't know.
Well, so talking about wind, I have a wedding at the Perez Art Museum, and they have this new wind structure that I've never seen before. And I don't know, Gaetana and maybe Marci, you maybe, and I don't know, Brooke has seen it, but they're half circles. They're plexiglass half circles, and they're like 10 foot tall, and they put them in S shapes.
Well, call them. Let's go play on that tomorrow.
I know.
For an outdoor wedding?
For an outdoor wedding, and it blocks the wind. It blocks the wind.
That's really cool. That's kind of like what they were using up in New York for COVID, where they would have these, like, what I call the Clearview igloo kind of feel, where each group would have their own little place that they can nestle in and enjoy the dinner.
Wow.
Well, and I think that's part of events. What I love is that we always come up with a solution no matter what it is. An
adaptable way to deal with the weather here.
Yeah, because I mean, if anything, COVID taught us that we could literally overcome anything.
Yes.
I mean, we did an event on the top of a parking garage for sakes. I almost let that out. Because we needed everybody to be at least 10 feet apart.
Right.
But we made it happen.
Dorothy totally should have a side pony, by the way, kids. We're gonna change this up.
Think about the fact that those igloos were brought out of COVID, but now they're transitioning and they're using them for keeping warm. Because
I know
it's like a superb idea. I mean, like, why didn't we think of that sooner? But you know what? Like you said, sometimes the best ideas are spawned out of necessity
or adversity. Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I think that if you want to invest in the traveler's insurance, excellent. But I don't think it should deter anybody from ever planning.
Well, look what they've done with ramen noodles. You know what I mean? Prime example.
Look at what they've done with ramen noodles.
Well, I mean, come on now.
Left turn.
Ham and cheese. Well, survival.
That was a squirrel moment.
Are you watching one of those cake baker things where they make these unusual cakes with?
No, but I am really trying to hunker down and discipline myself to try to get through Bridgerton. I had a conversation with Keith this afternoon, and I'm really trying.
Oh my God. I think we've exhausted this subject, my loves. All right. So I think in short order, guys, is that if you're deciding to plan a wedding here in South Florida, look at wedding insurance, hurricane insurance for your wedding. Don't let it deter you. Make sure that you're flexible in your planning process. Do have a honey fund or a rain fund for tents or those necessities, and do communicate dramatic and big effect with your guests and your vendors. Communication.
Listen to your vendors, definitely.
Listen to your vendors, but do not let it deter you from doing a wedding here in South Florida. All right, guys. I think that's it for today. I love you all. So thank you, Gaetana Kaplan with Gaetana Events, Marci Guttenber with An Affair to Remember by Marci, and of course the always gorgeous Brooke Logan Stoner. We will see you next Tuesday at 2:00. But for now, goodbye.
Bye.